let's press on. We've got a fun-packed day ahead. So we're going to have a really exciting day of thinking, and I hope of conversation as well. And that's why we are all here. And you're all here because you've been personally invited to share this day with us, and we're hoping that you'll have an opportunity to meet people from across different types of school from your own. And also, we thought that you would be the best people to actually share some of these conversations with us. So we've got sort of conversations built in throughout the day, but also we've got that lovely room behind us where at break time you'll be able to network and have, I hope, more lovely conversations. Just before we get started, I'd like to thank the Templeton World Charity Foundation for their support of this event. And this is part of our project, which is run in partnership with Oxford University, which is part of the Accelerating Insight project. This first session that I want to work on with you is basically, it's going to be a flash fry of Aristotle. And the reason I think it's important that we do this is all to just get on the same page with respect to the foundations that are alluded to whenever we talk about flourishing and well-being. So there's a lot of research going on in all sorts of departments of universities with respect to well-being and flourishing. And whenever you read any of that research, either it's overtly evoking Aristotle, or it's not mentioning Aristotle, but it's still deeply inspired by Aristotle. So I thought it made sense, given that all the sessions that are going to come are going to at some point talk in terms of Aristotelian flourishing, that it made sense for us to at least all be on the same page with what that means. So apologies to those of you who are incredibly well versed in Aristotle and don't need this session. It's just a flash fry. It won't take as long. So I sort of set myself the task of doing Aristotle in 15 minutes, which I thought was quite ambitious until I realized that Stephen Fry can actually do it in under 2 minutes. So this is Stephen Fry, Aristotle in 2 minutes, and then I'll expand on some of his key ideas. But just to expand on some of those key thoughts then. So it's eudaimonia, which is the word Aristotle uses that roughly translates as flourishing. So what does Aristotle mean by this? So essentially Aristotle has this idea that everything has its own nature and its own potential. And when something achieves its potential, that's a good thing. So if you've got an acorn, its full potential, if it realizes it, is to become a fully blown, beautiful, symmetrical oak tree. And that means it's good. It's flourished because it has achieved its full potential. It's become what it's capable of being. Now, that simple model is then extended to everything in the natural world by Aristotle, including people. So you might have lots of different types of cats, but they're all going to, if they're flourishing, achieve their feline nature in all fullness and beauty. The same for a person. So a good person is going to be one who achieves their full potential, who becomes fully what they are capable of being as a human being, not just as an animal. So this, for a human being, is obviously more than just reaching maturity and having offspring, which is where animals tend to stop and plants tend to stop. It's certainly a lot more than just becoming a sexy beast. Being fully what you're capable of being for a human being takes us beyond growth. Obviously, even a plant can grow. So human beings who achieve their full beauty as adults haven't necessarily achieved all they're capable of achieving. Because, of course, for a human being, the highest potentialities are to be intellectual, to use the mind, and also to become a moral person, aware of your own conscience and allowing that to impact upon your choices. So even a deformed body isn't going to diminish a human's full potential. So This promises to be quite a useful tool in schools because flourishing isn't entirely subjective for Aristotle. So there are measures which can be observed. So it's not just how I feel about myself, but whether everybody actually agrees with me. You know, I might think that I'm happy and actually rather a nice person, but does everybody else? And if not, then that is part of the dynamic. So flourishing isn't just about what I feel, it's about what I actually am and whether I've actually achieved flourishing. So people are all different. This isn't a way of saying everyone's the same, really, but it is a way of saying that everybody is a human being and that human nature requires more of us than just growth and reproduction. And to flourish and to be happy is going to be much more demanding than just living, eating, and breathing. So in the Nicomachean Ethics, Aristotle produces what's called the function argument. So whenever anything achieves its function, it basically is good, it's thriving, it's flourishing. So what is it, he asks himself, for a human being to achieve their human function? And in essence, boiling it down, to reason well is a human facility. It's a facility that animals don't have in the way we do. To reach right decisions, and then to have the character skills to actually act on those good decisions, to follow through with good behavior. So there's a kind of path that a person can follow. So at any point along this journey, a person can fail. So you need accurate information. That's obviously part of what we do in our schools, provide young people with accurate information. The hope is that they will then form a series of true beliefs based upon good information, that they will then use to apply their reasoning to any future situation that they happen to encounter, having reasoned well about what should be done, to realize what the good action is in this scenario, and then to have the character to do it, to follow through. For Aristotle, that is a human activity, and if a human being does that, then they have a chance of flourishing. This is a lifetime's journey. It's not just one action here and there. This is a lifetime of choices that leads to flourishing and happiness. Now, of course, there are shortcuts to immediate pleasure, so passive pleasures like watching TV. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's not going to provide a young person or any of us with a flourishing life. This journey cannot be shortcut. There's a path for Aristotle that must be followed. If you want authentic, deep-seated happiness, then there's a journey to be traveled as a human being, and just constant shortcuts to immediate pleasure won't result in a happy, flourishing, contented life. This is an example that I'm drawing on from Martha Nussbaum of how things can go wrong. So she imagines somebody who is morbidly obese, confronted with eating that extra bagel at breakfast. And she says this person perhaps might know that this bagel isn't good for them, that they don't really need it, they're not really hungry, but somehow, very often, they're going to eat it anyway. That needs explaining. Why would they do that anyway? So this is going through some of the places where that journey might fail. So the person, for example, might have inaccurate information. They might actually believe that bagels are calorie-free, or that they are not dangerously overweight. Either way, they've got wrong information, they've formed a wrong belief, they're going to make a poor choice, they're going to fail in human flourishing and be unhappy. Okay, so that's the Aristotle logic of that scenario. If you haven't got good information to work on, it's going to result in unhappiness because you'll make the wrong choices. It could be that they've got the right information, but they're assessing it wrongly. So they might think, yeah, no, these things are fully loaded with calories, but one more won't hurt. So they've kind of wrongly assessed the information. So again, inaccurate belief is formed, poor choices made, failure of the human function, unhappiness. So the next point at which the person can fail it kind of gets more interesting as these go on. So imagine now they've got accurate information. They know this bagel is fully loaded with calories. They know that they're overweight and they don't need it. They're not hungry. They've got a true belief about the impact of this bagel on their weight. But they kind of think, well, you know, you're going to have an extra one, aren't you? Well, if you have an extra one, I wouldn't want you to do that on your own. So I'll have one with you. So in other words, they use wrong or poor logic. This is an intellectual failure because they're using poor reasons to justify poor behavior. So they've got accurate information. They've formed a true belief, but they just think, oh, well, I've got my reasons. So a friend of mine who's a barrister said whenever he went to interview someone who'd committed some hideous crime, they always had good reasons. They always had good reasons for having done what they did. But they're not good reasons. They're not well reasoned out reasons. They're actually poor choices taken for bad reasons, which are taken to be good by the person. And the logic of that for Aristotle is that they have failed in their human function. They will not be happy. They will not flourish, because that then is a failure of the intellect. Okay, so the next one then is again where they've got accurate information and they've formed a true belief. But they're just not inclined to follow it. You know, we've all done this. I know this isn't good for me. I know I'm horribly overweight, but you know, I want it. So I'm going to eat it anyway. Now, for Aristotle, that's just weakness. He calls this weakness of will. He actually uses the word incontinent. Okay, so this person is incontinent. They're out of control. We all know what that word means. And the result of being weak-willed, of actually acting, because here's what's happening for Aristotle, you're acting against your nature. Your nature is to be a rational person. You know what you should do rationally, and you're now going to act against your reason. That is not going to result in happiness because that's a contradiction in the human function. So the result will be unhappiness. Okay? So that's just plain character failure, not having the strong enough character to follow through on what you know you should do. So the last one then, the last place that a person can fail is if they've got accurate information, they're actually reasoning well about this thing, about this bagel, but they're not going to allow all that information and all those good reasons that they've got to impact upon their belief system. Okay, so they've got all the information, but they think to themselves, I hear you, but I don't really commit to it. I hear you. I believe you, actually, at one level, but at another level, I'm just going to go ahead and eat the bagel anyway. Okay, so they haven't actually believed it they haven't allowed their good reasoning to be believed sufficiently to have an impact upon their behavior. So again, failure of the human function, unhappiness, lack of flourishing, character failure. They're damned, aren't they? So Aristotle's question then is, because he was the tutor of Alexander the Great, so he knew what education was. He was passionate about education. And he was surrounded by all these young men in Athens, and he was really committed to helping them to flourish, which is why he wrote what Stephen Fry colourfully describes as the first self-help book on being happy. So he put his mind to this and thought, what can I recommend to these people to ensure that they flourish and that they're actually happy? And his logic was that this is our nature. We all desire happiness. We all desire to flourish. We want to be happy, and yet we fail for all those reasons outlined there. So how can you become the kind of person who doesn't fail miserably and repeatedly with the results of living an unhappy life? So one of the keys to Aristotle now is habituation. So we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence then is not a single act, but a habit. So what habits we form throughout life are really, really important for Aristotle. So how do you know which habits to form? Well, he says, observe someone who's doing it well, and you will know who that is. He really believes we will know who that is in our lives, someone who's doing it better than us. Observe a wise person, and then kind of echo in your own life what they do. So if you notice that this person always tells the truth, even in difficult situations, try that. Mirror their good behavior. So when you're in a difficult situation, the key question for Aristotle, what would a wise person do? What would a virtuous person do? That's what you should now follow through with. That's your guide. So mirroring someone who's got it is really important for him. That's how you find out what you should be doing, what habits you should be forming. Now, one of the key, most important virtues for Aristotle, actually, is what he calls theoria, which is contemplation. In other words, just sitting and thinking for a while. That intelligent pause before you make a decision is what he's talking about here. And this is Aristotle, painted by Rembrandt, contemplating the bust of Homer, the poet Homer. And it's a very powerful, evocative painting, because even Aristotle, wise old Aristotle, is pictured here thinking. And what would Homer do? You know, he's thinking, what would this wise man do? So that reflection, deliberation before a decision is made. So the tools of flourishing. What would a wise person do? Who am I watching? And it's really important, therefore, to watch the right people and not just celebrities, but wise people, people who've got it right, people who are happy, and then to develop good habits. So the all-important role model, which Homer are you actually looking at? Aristotle quite comfortable with the idea that not everybody has the preconditions for flourishing. Actually, people think he might be a bit harsh on this. But I've given you some notes on that, so I won't spend any time on that. But good upbringing, good parenting, good role modeling, these are all critical, he thinks, for a child to be able to flourish long-term in life. So Aristotle's picture of flourishing, then, is very attractive. We can see, I think, why there's so much research going on around these thoughts, because it does appear to be a system which would apply in whatever school you happen to find yourself. It's not particularly religious, it's not particularly Christian, although, of course, it has inspired the Western Christian tradition quite significantly. But it gives teachers a tool. It gives teachers a kind of umbrella that they can sit underneath in staff meetings and unite the staff under this banner of flourishing, of well-being, of encouragement of the child, acknowledging that we can't solve every problem in the world, but knowing that we can play our part in very small ways along the way. Can it stand alone? That's a question, I think, that Professor McGrath is going to pick up on. Does it actually give us meaning and purpose? And I think those are the core questions that I'm going to leave you with on the Aristotle side of life. Okay, I hope you all, that was very, very quick, I know, but I hope you feel that you've got a handle on that Aristotelian model. We are recording today, and there is some notes on that session as well, but you will get a copy of all these recordings, so if we go a bit quick, you can go back and look at it again, and equally, you're very welcome to use those videos in staff training in September when everyone comes back after their holidays. So thank you very much. I'm going to be handing over to Anthony Selden in just 1 minute, so we'll just pause there while we switch the computer over, and maybe you can have a little chat about Aristotle for 2 minutes while we do that. Thank you.